The goal is to have a vision for your life such that, all things considered, that justifies your effort. Okay, so then what do? Well, then you turn down to the micro routines. It's like, okay, well, this is what I'm aiming for. How does that instantiate itself day to day, week to week, month to month? And that's where something like a schedule can be unbelievably useful. Google Calendar. It's like, make a damn schedule and stick to it. Okay, so what's the rule with a schedule? It's not a bloody prison. That's the first thing that people do wrong. They say, well, I don't like to follow a schedule. It's like, well, what kind of schedule are you setting up? Well, I have to do this, then I have to do this, then I have to do this, and then I just go play video games, because who wants to do all these things that I have to do? It's like, wrong. Set the damn schedule up so that you have the day you want. That's the trick. It's like, okay, I've got tomorrow. If I was going to set it up so it was the best possible day I could have, practically speaking, what would it look like? Well, then you schedule that. And obviously there's a bit of responsibility that's going to go along with that, because if you have any sense, one of the things that you're going to insist upon is that at the end of the day, you're not in worse shape than you were than at the beginning of the day, right? Because that's a stupid day. If you have a bunch of those in a row, you just dig yourself a hole and then you bury yourself in it. It's like, sorry, that's just not a good strategy. It's a bad strategy. So maybe 20% of your day has to be responsibility and obligation, or maybe it's more than that, depending on how far behind you are. But even that, you can ask yourself, okay, well, I've got these responsibilities. I have to schedule the damn things in. What's the right ratio of responsibility to reward? And you can ask yourself that, just like you'd negotiate with someone who is working for you. It's like, okay, you got to work tomorrow. Okay, so I want you to work tomorrow. And you might say, okay, well, what are you going to do for me that makes it likely that I'll work for you? Well, you could ask yourself that, So maybe you do an hour of responsibility and then you play a video game for 15 minutes. I don't know, whatever turns your crank, man. But, you have to negotiate with yourself and not tyrannize yourself. Like you're negotiating with someone that you care for, that you would like to be productive and have a good life. And that's how you make the schedule. It's like, and then you look at the day and you think, well, if I had that day, that'd be good. Great. And you're useless and horrible, so you'll probably only hit it with about 70% accuracy, but that beats the hell out of 0, right? And if you hit it even with 50% accuracy, another rule is, well, aim for 51% the next week, or 50.5% for God's sake, or because you're going to hit that position where things start to loop back positively and spiral you upward. And so that's one way that you can work on your conscientiousness, is plan a life you'd like to have. Do you say, okay, well, for the next week, I'm going to read 10 minutes a day, and I'm going to try to limit the distractions. And if you're successful at that, then you could try 12 minutes a day. And if you're successful at that, you could try 15 minutes a day. And the trick is to set a goal for yourself that is slightly beyond your current level of performance, enough to be challenging, enough to be worthwhile if you accomplished, but not so difficult that you're likely to fail.
I plan my day obsessively. My calendar is always absolutely full, and often weeks in advance. And I plan in the morning, especially when I'm on top of things. And I plan each hour, and I probably plan each minute. And yes, it leads to way higher productivity. You decide what your goals are going to be. You place them in the calendar. Use the calendar as your friend, Because what you want to do with the calendar is design a day that you want to have, or a day that would be good for you. And a day that would be good for you is one that you're when you end the day, you feel that you've moved yourself ahead towards your valued goals, and that you've kept chaos under control. And that enables you to sleep soundly and with a good conscience, and to know that the next day is going to be at least not worse than that day. Planning is unbelievably useful. You need to figure out what it is that you're aiming at and why, and then you need to figure out how you're going to break that down over the months and the weeks and the days. But I would approach your calendar like it's your best friend. You think, okay, I'm going to design a week, man, that I really want to have. And that means you can schedule in leisure and all the things that you want to do, which you absolutely should do. Learning to plan is unbelievably useful to schedule your time, because that's your life, But schedule the life you want. That means you have to schedule your responsibilities obviously, because responsibilities are those things that ruin your life if you don't fulfill them.
Intelligence is a very good predictor of academic performance. And there's not a lot you can do about your intelligence. I mean, you can squander it, but it's very difficult to improve it. Conscientiousness, well, it's a trait too, so it's hard to work on, but we know that conscientious people get better grades. And it's reliable, and it's a powerful effect. And so, if your time use is organized, then the probability that you're going to be successful is very high. So, one of the things you might think about is make friends with a calendar, like Google Calendar or something like that. And I can tell you some tricks about that, because really it is important. Like, and I'm not kidding around about this. If you're low in conscientiousness, it's really going to trip you up as you walk through life. There's not very many advantages to it that I've been able to see. And I'm not assuming that just because you don't follow a schedule, you're low in conscientiousness. But it is one of the items that mark it. The advantage I've seen so far to being unconscientious is that if you become unemployed, it doesn't bother you as much. And I mean, that actually turns out to matter in some situations. So like, you know, if a big company has to shed 50% of its employees, it's the conscientious people are going to suffer themselves to death for it. And the unconscientious people, they're not going to care anyways, because they weren't working anyway. So it doesn't matter if they have a job or not. So here's one way of thinking about making use of a schedule. Often people are afraid of schedules because they think of them as a trap. You know, you make a schedule and it's like this little prison that you have to live inside. And, you know, and all you're doing in your schedule is putting down things you have to do or should do. And so, you know, there's not a lot of fun in that. And so not only is it a trap or a prison, but it's kind of an unpleasant one. But a way to work with the schedule in a lot more sophisticated way is to think, well, I'm going to plan the next week, say, because you plan it day by day, but we'll take the week as the unit level of analysis and think, well, I'd like to plan a week I'd like to have. And then your schedule all of a sudden becomes a tool for increasing the quality of your life. And that's a whole different issue. You know, because you might think, what's the emotion that you suffer, assuming you suffer one of these emotions, if you have an essay that's due and you're not doing it? Like, would you regard that as a pleasant emotion or unpleasant emotion? Okay, so is there anybody who is disagreeing with a statement that having an essay due or overdue that you're not doing is unpleasant? And so recent research, and really recent, I only got this paper like a week ago, I think it's about 4 months old, seem to indicate that conscientious people feel less guilt, but they're more guilt prone. So if they don't do something, that makes them guilty, but they organize their time so they are doing the things they're supposed to do, so then they don't feel guilty. So anyways, back to the schedule. So, all right, you think about your week and you think about your day, and you think, well, how would you improve the quality of a given day or a given week? Well, one of the ways of improving it is to not put yourself into the situation where there are things hanging over your head that you have to feel guilty and ashamed about, because that's a very unpleasant way of being. And, you know, if you have an essay that's due in a week and you're procrastinating, then the fact that you have to do that essay can ruin the whole week. And even when you're doing something that's positive, hypothetically, it's kind of that horrible kind of positive that you experience when you know that you should be doing something else. And so that's when you end up watching YouTube videos about like dancing cats or something like that. You know, and it's at best it's a guilty pleasure. It's not a pleasure at all. You think like, what the hell am I doing watching videos of dancing cats, you know? But then you know that you're procrastinating, and that's low quality, very low quality existence. So if you use your schedule, you can think, okay, well, here's some times that I'm going to do this work. And then you can also sort of ask yourself about that when you're designing your schedule. Because you don't want to design a schedule like you're Adolf Hitler telling yourself what to do, you know, because you're not going to comply with it then. And so the other thing you want to do is you want to schedule in things that you want to do. And then you want to look at the day or the week and you want to think, hey, that's a week I'd like to have. If I had a week like that, it would be good. You know, I'd be caught up so that all that negative emotion doesn't have to accrue. And I would have done a bunch of things that I'm interested in doing, and at the end of the week, I'd be in better shape than I was at the beginning. And if you treat a schedule like that, so that what you're using it is to design the days and weeks that you want to have, instead of using it as this little, you know, jail that you have to put yourself in that you're not going to do anyways, then you can learn to use them. And that's one thing you can do to make yourself more industrious, or more conscientious.